This is why you listen to this podcast, guys. You're getting neuroplasticity, improvement training that you never thought you would have gotten. No, I can't wait to be rearranging the hell out of my office and my wife comes in like, what are you doing? I'm training my microplasticity.
Artificial intelligence at the moment too. Absolutely brilliant. Since it came out, I stopped using Google.
Dude, same.
The result you get from AI is how you ask the question.
You can try to be everything for everyone and you're going to be nothing special to anyone.
And ended up getting the nickname the prostitute of the medical device industry from just traveling around, working for teams.
It's an incredibly complex space.
I'd disagree.
You make it simple, but it is complex.
I love cooking. I've never read a recipe in my life, but I've obsessed with how each one of the individual ingredients work, and then you plug and play them together in any way that you see fit.
Yeah.
So understand each layer, see the levers, and then you just mix and match.
The elements are finite, the alchemy is infinite, right? You can always, combine them in different ways, just like your ingredients.
Absolutely, and there is now the danger side of AI that I've noticed where...
Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of the MedTech Innovation Podcast. I'm your host, Spencer Jones, founder at Eyedea MedTech, and we have a doozy for you today. It's not that often that we go international, but today we did. We've got Damian Carr hailing all the way from Ireland. He's an absolute thought leader in catheter design and innovation, globally recognized for the contributions that he's made to minimally invasive medical technologies. He's the founder at Eyedea MedTech Education and the author of the Catheter R&D Handbook, which is like a crazy, amazing guidebook, everything you need to know about catheter design, engineering, and manufacturing. He's really passionate about disseminating and kind of progressing industry expertise, training engineers, empowering them to advance their skills and understanding of kind of all things catheter design, development, manufacturing. He's got so much passion. You're going to see this come through in the pod episode, and he's got an awesome beard to boot, and his enthusiasm is truly infectious, and he keeps a great eye on why it all matters, right? Patient care at the end of the day. So we go through, disruption in the catheter industry, advancements, trends that he's seeing, diving into, his handbook and the thesis behind it and his design thinking strategy. So it's such a good episode. We went a full hour and could have talked for more, but I know you're going to love it. So without further ado, let's get into the episode. So Damian, great to have you on the pod. Where do we find you today?
Great to be here, Spencer. I'm based in the west of Ireland, a lovely little city called Galway, which is the home of medtech over the side of Europe.
Okay, and I'm going to ask you more about that here in a little bit. But
do indeed.
Damian, I love what you're doing at Eyedea MedTech Education, principally because you have such a laser focus with your mission and your audience is just so crystal clear. And I'm a big believer in you can try to be everything for everyone and you're going to be nothing special to anyone. You know what I mean? And so we try to do the same thing. We've got a very focused audience here at Eyedea MedTech, and we try to serve them to the best of our abilities. And you just do an incredible job of that. So first off, hats off. But second, for the people that maybe don't know as much about Eyedea MedTech Education, or you or what you do, tell us how Eyedea MedTech Education got started, a little bit of your story and what you're passionate about, what you do.
Absolutely, Spencer. I'll go back a few years. At the age of 11, I was diagnosed with this lovely thing called tuberculosis, which ended up actually rotting away the bottom right half side of my lung. I fortunately had somehow cured myself of it at the time. My father had gone into isolation for 2 months, but I remember overhearing I'd have a life expectancy of around 50 years. And coming from a rural household in Ireland, rural farming background, there was no way of actually coming and telling a non-verbal child at the time, sorry son, but a few years to go, best of luck with it. So they said nothing. And I remember I was an innovator from the age of 6. That's all I wanted to do. But I remember looking around the hospital and thinking, simple tubes, white boxes, this is easy. Make a new lung, fix myself, how difficult could that be? So grew up, ended up being born 10 minutes away from where the MedTech hub is here in Galway. And I ended up becoming obsessed with just learning new devices, or lots of contract manufacturers, and ended up getting the nickname the prostitute of the medical device industry from just traveling around, working for teams. You weren't going to buy me for money. I didn't care about a pension, any of that stuff. Just give me cool projects to work on.
Yeah.
And then eventually I realized that there wasn't this skill and knowledge. It was only kind of coming new into the world. Not many people had the exposure to go around and make as many mistakes as me. So I started training contract manufacturers on all the materials, all the different processes, equipment, everything they can do. And then it just branched out from that. So my goal at the moment is rapidly accelerate medtech devices by around 10 years. And I'll aim higher as time goes on. But that was the basis of what the whole company was created from.
That's awesome. And I, in a past life, founded a company in the vascular access space, which is, not as advanced as the catheters that I know you're dealing with, but there was some intricacies, and we can get into some dual lumen, which I do also want to talk to you about too. So I know it's an incredibly complex space, right? But
I disagree.
you make it simple, but it is complex.
I think the knowledge that you have is so cross-transferable. And the best way to describe this to people is how I cook. I love cooking. I've never read a recipe in my life, but I've obsessed with how each one of the individual ingredients work, and then you plug and play them together in any way that you see fit.
Yeah.
So understand each layer, see the levers, and then you just mix and match.
Yeah, you're making it sound really easy. Like cooking from taste and not out of a cookbook is also something I know people struggle with. But anyway, so catheter technology space, and correct me if I'm wrong, like has historically been dominated by like incremental improvements. I don't know if you'd say yes or no. And I'm kind of drawing this from like some other spaces, but like incremental improvements rather than disruptive innovation, right? So what are some fundamental shifts that you've witnessed, right, over the last decade that you think are genuinely changing patient outcomes versus just making marginal improvements and incremental improvements?
It happens with the obstacles that people are finding in the R&D space. So the big thing was I was an R&D engineer. I'd be coming in to work on a project and I need to make some samples and prototypes. I go out to supplier, minimum order quantity, 1,000 pieces, big long lead time. So I say, screw that. I look at what the company have already, see their materials, copy and paste the materials they're already using, avoid any risk. And then it was just incremental changes because I was doing stepping stones on what was accessible.
Yeah.
Big change now, the likes of Chamfer coming out, where you can actually go order 5, 10 samples. And then while you're on it, you can even see the other materials that are in the same size range. So your brain is starting to ruminate and saying like, what does this nylon do? What's this grade of P-backs? And you get to mix and match and try more things. So it's the ability to fail much faster.
Basically that kind of iterative life cycle, when you can shrink that from, months to weeks and even sometimes days, and then like parallel path things more easily, right? Because if you're not going to place a 30,000 order, that's going to take 3 months, you're not going to parallel path that with multiple strategies. But if you can go on something like Chamfer and get a bunch of different samples and try those out, and then you can parallel path and then cut it from, like we said, months to weeks or days. And shout out Chamfer, Julie and the team. They're doing amazing work. And like, if you haven't checked out Chamfer, recommend people go do it for sure.
So the interesting thing was the contract manufacturers who worked with so many different companies, they would have a bigger stock of various materials. So working within contract manufacturers, I had a warehouse of options to go messing with and playing with. And then the other big thing is the knowledge of the processes. So simply knowing that you can make holes in a catheter and then the different ways of making holes. So those types of innovations, and now the likes of 3D printing, going to sleep, having a handle printed out in the morning, being able to create jigs and fixtures to optimize the processes. And even one of the biggest innovations I've seen within companies is when they can start making their own equipment. And when you make your own equipment, you understand that process inside out, and you can now make new ways of developing catheters that haven't been out before, because we're lucky there's only a limited amount of materials you can use.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of ways that you can use those materials.
Mm-hmm.
They all run on the same fundamental first principles. Some stuff you can melt, some stuff you can drill holes in it, some stuff you can weld together. So as the new technologies, and even the people who are working in companies who are now creating their own device, the likes of pilot line tools, where you can now buy this R&D equipment for very cheap and start developing prototypes in a bedroom lab very simply. And the globalization of that awareness.
Yeah.
Even knowing what materials you can actually pick saves you from having to just use what you know in the past.
Yeah, that's true. The elements are finite. The alchemy is infinite, right? You can always, combine them in different ways, just like your ingredients. One thing, like kind of for the innovators out there listening, like it's not trivial understanding the applications and the different ways, how to drill holes, how you can ultrasonically weld this, how you can bond this thing. Because when you're really trying to innovate and you're trying to think of ideas and the way things happen, like if you are kind of engaging your intellect and like you understand all of the different processes that go into it, and you don't think about it as, oh, well, the engineers, they just melt plastic or whatever, right? Like you actually fundamentally understand like, oh, well, we can't do this because under undercut, or, oh, well, we can't really two-shot mold this because the durometer's too soft and we need it right. Like, when you understand that, you are so much better of an innovator and a designer. So like, whether you're a clinical innovator or you have a business background or whatever, maybe you're a biomedical engineer, but this is a lot of mechanical stuff you're dealing with. Like, do not shy away from really getting into the nitty gritty, because not only are you going to come up with better designs, you are going to be able to solve problems with your vendors or partners way faster, right?
Yeah, don't be afraid of jumping into it. The way that you learn is from the failures that you've made. So big believer in fail forward, and a very impressive man, Patrick Mulholland. He started up Vistamed in Ireland. He had told me that if in the morning he lost all the equipment, all the building, everything else, all the materials, it wouldn't be as bad as if he lost all the people that he had in his company, because their experience of the failures and how to get over them is what has actually made the blood of the company.
Yeah, for sure. Talent's everything. And I do have some talent questions coming as well. But so on the market disruption piece, you published a handbook that essentially democratizes, right, catheter design knowledge in a big way. And I know the answer to this question to a degree, but I have to ask it. Like, are you concerned about disrupting your own business by getting this out there and making the specialized knowledge so widely available? Or is kind of this disruption precisely your strategy?
Precisely my strategy. Not that it's necessarily a disruption, and I did have to walk on eggshells to figure out how to go around this book and how I can share it. And I realized that a lot of the proprietary information that companies kind of claim onto, my thinking is, if you're using off-the-shelf equipment, there's only so much innovation or proprietary information you can create. And a lot of it is actually just compensating for how you develop the tooling or the little bits that go inside. So you have an extrusion line, you make your extrusion tool and die, you figure out what process parameters work with that, and then that's your proprietary information. Someone else makes an easier tooling die, shoots it back out, they don't have as much troubles, they don't need to have that knowledge.
Yeah.
The stuff that I've all shared, I've taken it from suppliers. I've taken it people who will happily tell me this is how the machines work. So it's essentially just the steps or the cooking tools almost to what goes into it. I don't think it's necessarily disruptive. I would have loved it this was out 30 years before and I didn't have to go through the headaches of making it myself.
I totally agree. And I mean, even like outside of kind of that engineering, design, and manufacturing piece, I think one of the biggest Achilles heels of medtech is how siloed people are with their knowledge and their ability. I mean, you see a lot of people that are like willing to kind of help and volunteer time, but there's just seems like to be this pervasive feeling of like, well, I can't tell you about what I'm working on, or we can't share anything, or I feel like it's so short-sighted. I don't think there's like really any hard evidence that having that mentality serves your own business or company better. You know what I mean? And it's like design and tech, it's just the opposite. Everybody's building in the open. They're sharing each other's tools. They're sharing tactics and strategies. And like, look how much more rapidly advancing a lot of their stuff is versus like a lot of the medtech innovation. So I think like that mindset of getting everything out and trying to basically just have better trained people with better knowledge, trying to innovate, because like at the end of the day, what is all of this for? It's to drive better patient outcomes.
Absolutely, exactly. And I wish it wasn't just from the company front doing it out to the competitors. I had it when I started in the first company I was in, and I seen some guy working on something. I was like, that's amazing. How do you do that? And he turned around and he said, I'm not telling you, you'll end up taking my job. And then that thought just stuck me for a while, and I was like, okay, you might know this, but in 2 or 3 years, this knowledge will be worth nothing because everyone else around you is sharing stuff. They're going much higher because when you share something, people will tell you stuff back. I've seen that with the companies who do share the information on, this is like the contract manufacturers who bring the customers in, like, this is how we do all this stuff. The customer ends up saying, oh, we've seen it somewhere else to add this. And just the way that it evolves is so much quicker than if you're trying to hold down all those secrets.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's the whole open source versus closed source model. And you're seeing that play out in AI. And it's pretty obvious that open source is like going to rue the day. Open source medtech. I haven't said that phrase before, but that's kind of what we need. That's what you're doing, right, with the handbook. So let me ask you this too. So your educational approach, it really like compresses decades of experience into intensive workshops, publications, etc. So what evidence do you have that this accelerated learning actually translates to better device innovation versus the traditional model, right, of med device development? Like, what proof have you seen in the pudding? I'm just like, any way you can speak to kind of like, these are the fruits of the labor and here's how you're tracking success. You know what I mean?
It was done in a roundabout sense of me in school growing up didn't work. I found out as dyslexic when I was 18. My head works entirely in pictures and animations. So how I absorb the outside world, if I can create a picture in my head and I can understand it, it sticks there forever. So I went with a whole new approach of how to get my thoughts into other people's minds. So it's a mix of animations that go on in the background, few technical data, information on it, and then you feel the materials in your hands. So it's not me trying to educate someone, it's someone experiencing what the art is. So from that, it's essentially the first time you try something, it's scary. It's like when you go to a new country and you're like trying out their foods or even how the places around the hotel works and everything else, it's overwhelming and daunting. But the second time you're back there, you're much more comfortable, you know how to walk around, you know how to get there. So I essentially just give people the experience of going through a use of each one of those materials and then show these are the catheters that are in, these are the devices that are in, this is why they were picked, why they were selected. So easily not only just making safer devices, but it's making safer devices because they're making them in less steps using simpler materials, simpler processes.
I'm the same way though. I feel like, 60% of people are visual learners. I'm just shocked that number is that low, but I'm the same way, dude. Like I think in pictures and kind of blurred concepts, almost like GIFs, you know what I mean? Where it's just these flashes. I'm like the exact same way. And when you said that, when I was at MD&M in Anaheim, which like, I know you were there too. I'm pissed at myself that we didn't bump into each other, grab coffee or beer or whatever. But whenever I was walking around MD&M, we met up with Blaine Larson, who's at Rookery Labs. Shout out to Blaine. Him and his team are great. But he talked about training up engineers and things like that, teaching them to think in 3 dimensions. You know what I mean? Really understand things at a 3-dimensional level, and then really kind of zooming in down to a molecular level and thinking about and understanding, well, why is this positively charged, or why is there a good adhesive, cohesive strength if you're molding something or whatever, right? So, but when you said that, it just like immediately popped in my head of like him thinking in 3 dimensions. And like, I think as a product designer and an engineer, it's like so critical. And even if you're not an engineer, when you're an innovator, like having the ability to think like that is so helpful.
And latching it on to your own experiences, what you understand already. So I talk about a braided tube and people can hear this and think this is out of my head. If I talk about a garden hose, and then people are like, okay, I'm more comfortable with the concept. It's plastic with a wire that's wrapped around and tied around. And just like garden hose, stops it from kinking and folding over so the water can stay flowing. And then you're like, okay, catheters now make a lot more sense. So my goal is, all this stuff already. You just need it expressed to you in a way that is more digestible. And then have a few animations in the background so you can target that too. So you said at the start, I have a target audience. I had thought so too. I thought it was R&D engineers. And then I have accountants, I have investors, I have random people coming into these workshops and going away and just critiquing the coworkers that they had seen before, being like, well, why didn't they use a coil there? 2 days before, they knew accountancy, nothing else about catheters. And then they're like, this is just
it's cool.
Simple knowledge, just framed in a new light.
I absolutely love a good analogy. You know what I mean? They're so helpful. So looking at the US market, I feel like a lot of the people, like there's your traditional kind of medtech hubs, but like I'm curious if there's anywhere kind of in America that you see as like emerging as a new hotspot for like medtech talent. You know what I mean? Is there any schools cranking stuff out, or any pockets where you're like, you just watch this space, it's pretty interesting?
It's very hard to pick a place because every time I turn around, especially when I was over in Anaheim, every time I turn around, I was like, this is not meant to exist for another 15, 20 years. It's like the rapid pace that stuff is happening. And it is because of that shared knowledge that's around. People are in universities and incubation hubs and all the companies around. So similar to Galway, the reason Galway in Ireland got so big with medtech is Boston Medtronic came in and all these smaller companies started building themselves around it to service those companies. Then other medtech companies came in because they said, we can get services right next door. And then that just grew and populated. So obviously Minneapolis and California are hubs for that. But everywhere I turn around it, because the world is getting smaller, because the internet's getting bigger, I couldn't say that there's one single place, because I'm seeing random places in Ohio that are coming out with a technology that I'm like, this is complete game changer. So I couldn't pick an actual place, Spencer, I'm afraid.
No. And I mean, that was a fine answer. I've heard some like good things about some activity in Indiana and some of the like the economic development incentives going on there. And some of that's biotech too, but a lot of the times that gets blended together. And then I know there's some good activity going on in Atlanta as well. And it's never been not really, it's a hub for a lot of things, right? But, and they've got, Georgia Tech there, but I was talking to Portal Innovations, which is kind of more on like the office and lab space and incubation. And they've got their Atlanta office. Emory's there, you know what I mean? So those are two that kind of have popped into my head. I wish we could make Northwest Arkansas, on that list, but it's not quite there yet. I don't want to try to not spit too much hyperbole here, but it's not there yet. But continuing on with the kind of the competitive landscape, are there any organizations that in your mind are like, damn near leapfrogging some kind of industry norms or kind of industry practice in terms of like what they're able to do with development? Are there any that you see that you would just say, these one or two or however many people are really just like kind of out in front? And then if so, like, what is it that's giving them that ability? Is it operational? Is it talent? Is it capital? Is it structure or something else entirely?
Talent would be one big one, but there's one thing that I think where it stems up, so you can't exactly pick a place that it emerges from. But if you find people who have a real life problem, if they've suffered an illness themselves, if they have a family member, someone close to them, that's where I've seen people just jump into obsession mode. And then it's essentially, do they have the path or enough knowledge to get the confidence to actually just say, look, I'm going to make this device. I'm going to make it work and I'm going to keep powering through it.
Yeah.
For the companies that do excel, they're the ones that make their own equipment. Fantastic company, Freudenberg Medical, the one based in Ireland. A braiding machine is the only machine that they would actually buy in. Everything else they would custom produce. So what they can do with catheters is not the same as what the other 50 companies around the country might do.
Yeah.
So any companies I see doing that or leveraging off the newer suppliers selling the new kind of vertical laminators or any of this new equipment, or some of the stuff that MSI are creating, if you stay on the trends with the new equipment that's coming out, like that unlocks so much additive processes and additive value that you can add to medical devices. So I couldn't say a company. There's one, MIS in Minneapolis.
Yep.
I've seen some of the stuff they're working on. And
I know those boys, they're good. They do good work. Their design, like you go to their website, it feels good. They're just really good at what they do. I totally agree.
Absolutely. Obsess over the little things. And then another thing is, like we were saying earlier, the access to all those different materials. They have such a beautiful warehouse where they stock up all the materials, knowing that this can be used again in the future. We don't even know how, but it's good to keep a few there.
That's awesome. I would say one group that I think is doing some like truly great stuff, and I think it aligns with the kind of the building their own equipment to a degree. Resolution Medical. Those guys, they've got a cardiac biosimulator. They've got like a physio heart for some electrophysiology stuff. They got a bio liver, heart valve, biosimulator stuff. So like in addition to kind of like they've got a great team, great culture, and they're smart. Like having the ability to do those things and do those tests kind of like in-house, I think is like such a like, again, we're talking about shortening that iterative cycle, right? The evaluation is part of that iterative cycle. You evaluate it. Did it work? What do we need to change? And I feel like having all of that stuff like kind of under one roof essentially is just a cheat code, honestly.
Absolutely. If I pick up a random thing in front of me here, if I have to get an extrusion, I have to order it. No one's going to be too happy if I order the wrong size. So I'll spend probably a week, 2 weeks as a standard engineer, speccing this out, making sure it's right, going through the order process, getting everything there. But compare that to if I just had a random extrusion left down in the warehouse, I'd pick it up, I'd try it, an hour later, I'd be so far ahead. So it's similar with testing. You even think you might use this test, go in, do it, try it, see, and then the knowledge you get back and how that sends you forward, like you can never iterate that fast if you're having to depend externally, not even being able to take calculated risks. You just have to calculated confirmation that you're doing this because it's needed and you can justify it.
Yeah, for sure. Understanding your ideal customer profile is tough in and of itself, but even once you get there, how do you identify the specific surgeons and physicians that are going to be the most likely to buy, purchase, fight for your device based on what they're doing in their own practice? What I use is Alpha Sophia. I've been using it for over 2 years. It's an incredible intelligent data platform. They have Medicare, Medicaid, and commercial payer data, so you can see CPT, DRG volumes for all the procedures they're doing, trends over time. You can see where they're practicing, different site locations of care. You can even see where they went to school, open payments data. The physician profiles are gorgeous, and it really helps you translate your understanding of your ideal customer profile into better targeted sales list, better funnels for your sales team to go out and execute on, so they're not just spraying and praying. I can't tell you enough how it's changed our approach in sales and marketing to just hoping for the best to really working through a defined high value target list that's going to be game changers for our business when we win that business. So if you're scaling a business, if you're just a startup, there's plans that Alpha Sophia has that can fit your budget. If you're interested at all in leveling up your sales funnel, leveling up your sales and marketing team, go to alphasophia.com and check them out today. I always like to ask this question to people that do product development, design, all of that stuff. But like, what are some almost like first principles or kind of like mantras or things that you always preach, right? When you're talking about product development and kind of the strategy and the things that kind of like rules to live by. And I'm thinking kind of broad principles, right? Like less technical, more like strategic stuff. Like what are the things that come to mind when you hear that?
Fail fast, fail early is the quick one that we've kind of covered over. I'm a big fan of throwing shit at the wall.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's my phrase of at the very start, I'm just going to throw out every single idea that I have onto loads of little post-its on the wall. And we innovate from our memory and our experience. So I like bringing random people in the room. If you have someone in the room who's not a medical device expert, but they spent the last 10 years doing sewing or stitching or knitting, like you'd be surprised about the way that they will look at that same problem compared to your laser vision focused on what can be produced. Another thing is, use the likes of what Chamfer is out at the moment. I used to have to go to different suppliers' websites and see what new materials they are advertising. Because I'm basing it from my experience, I'd be using the materials that I know, going on to this, and if I don't know, I think I'm lucky enough that I can give a call to someone, chat with them and say, tell me all about this. And my biggest advice to that is it's okay to be completely stupid. So ask a load of stupid questions and you will get a lot of smart answers.
Yeah.
If you ask a very tailored question, the person on the other end will probably answer it in 5 or 10 words.
Yeah.
If you ask a very open, naive question, they will go into detail and they'll keep going further and further. And that's when you'll start learning of the new insights of what you can add to this product. Artificial intelligence at the moment too, absolutely brilliant.
Dude, you read my mind. I was just about to ask you about that because anybody that's ever talked to me at any point over the past 6 months, I've probably brought AI up to them. But are you using it? Are you utilizing it? And whether it's consulting work, workshops, personal life, but I'm just thinking like, how are you using it? Have you tried to see, hey, here's an application and here's some design constraints. What materials should I be thinking about? And have you tried to use it for those kind of technical problem solving things?
I've used it in everything. I think since it came out, I stopped using Google.
Dude, same.
Now though, so I'll give a little bit of nugget advice on ChatGPT and the likes of that later, but I've used it in every since, and I'd see it almost like Google Maps.
Yeah.
So it will get you close to the front door of where you need to go. Take a lot of it with a pinch of salt. It will tell you stuff that might be used in other types of devices and stuff. So use it as almost a shitty first draft of getting around places. But even you write in, I have a PTCA catheter, write me out a test plan that I might need for design verification.
Yep.
It'll write out your test plan. Now do a test development report, give me what it might look like, fill it in, make it into a Microsoft Excel file so I can just download it. And then if you do some testing, put up the testing and say, what would happen if I actually changed the OD or increased the wall thickness? So take it as getting you 80% of the way there, and you're an engineer. You have to do some engineering. You're going to be still doing the last 20%. Just knock out that first 80% of the way there.
Dude, that is exactly how I think about it too. It's like, that first 80% may have taken you, a week, right? Shrink it down to 15 minutes and then spend way more time and attention to that last 20%. And you're going to get it done faster. And I think it's going to be better. Like you're going to probably miss less stuff. I'm the same way, but I had an idea for you. I was going to pitch you on, but the handbook, right, that you created, I think you should basically take an LLM, you could use and wrap it, feed it into the LLM, and then like have a Eyedea MedTech Education LLM. That is, you can come in and ask anything about catheters, and it's pulling from all the different relevant parts of the handbook, but it's helping people get specific questions asked and answered. You know what I mean? And there's people I know that you can charge $5 a month for access to that, $10 a month for access or whatever. So anyway, just an idea. I've got some people that could help you do it if you ever want to do that. But I was just thinking like, man, like having all of that rich information and context and graphics and being able to chat with it, because I think chat is how people want information these days. It's on demand, right? They either want it in person or on demand instantly. But just an idea, throwing it out there.
Toyed around with it, made up a bot similar of an old book that I had written and now it was a different AI that was being used at the time. So the big problem with AI, not the big problem, the result you get from AI is how you ask the question.
Right.
So I found that it was skewing the information to the point that it sounded very confident, and people want to just ask simple questions without writing a big long paragraph or essay. So I found out that the AI was actually throwing back what seemed very good,
Yeah.
but it was mixing everything up. So I'll keep toying with it until it gets there.
Yeah.
But it brings me to how to use AI well.
Yeah.
So how you write the question is how you get the answer.
Yeah.
We're not going to spend 2 to 4 years studying to be a prompt engineer. So if I say I want to design a pen, I will ask AI, write me a prompt on how to design a pen.
Yes.
If you write the prompt, I'll copy paste that book back in, change out whatever I need to, and click enter. And then I get a PhD answer coming out the other side.
Totally agree. I mean, having AI help you do AI is something like people don't even think about, but like, absolutely. And I mean, there's a lot of workflows that for software development where they're doing that, right? They're using ChatGPT for code or Claude 3.7, Sonnet for code, taking it over into Cursor, which is basically LLM driven software coding platform. But no, totally agree. And I think similar point. So we launched medtechvendors.com, and people can go in and they can natural language search for what they want or what they're looking like, what they're building, right? Like, and we've got some example prompts in there, and it's like, hey, tell me what you want to build. It's like, hey, I need an extrusion company that does design and development to help me with my catheter delivered structural heart catheter or whatever, you see what I'm saying, or structural heart valve. And when we're looking through like the queries, right, because like we're like, okay, what are we missing, what do we not have suppliers, vendors for, etc. Like, it's so crazy what people search. It's people just put in like catheter or like marker bands, and it's like, so we're kind of actively moving towards and developing a more chat centric feature to where like if someone puts in catheter, it's not just going to spit them an answer. It's going to be like, hey, I need a little bit more information. Is this a peripheral catheter? Is this a what type? And like basically keep pulling the strings with them until it's like, okay, I've got a really solid depiction of what you're actually looking for in building. But same thing, it's like if you just try to give one answer off of like the initial user input, for a lot of people, it's just you're never going to be able to have enough context to give them the right information.
Absolutely. And there is now the danger side of AI that I've noticed, where if you're using it to find a very specific answer, brilliant. But if you're using it to do your job for you, it will give you all the things, but you don't get to understand what it's actually saying. You are essentially just a catalyst for AI coming in and going out the other side without you ever growing and developing.
Yeah, totally.
About the book. Now, I designed the book after 2 principles. One was my favorite book growing up, which is a book where you can open up any single page and you can follow the story from where it is. You don't have to read before and afterwards. It was called The Dictionary. I love it.
You saying your favorite book was a dictionary is crazy, but what was it? You said there was a second principle. What was it? Or
the second one was that I wrote it so that 10-year-olds could read it.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
So it's not going to be done in a language where it was too confusing for people to pick up. And the amount of people I've heard so far who their kids are fighting to get the book off them or keep stealing the book and bringing it down the room, because I wrote it for me when I was a kid.
That's so cool, dude.
What I would need to go making a medical device on my kitchen table with a hairdryer.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's so cool. Yeah, I've got, speaking of like education and the younger, I just had a podcast with Santosh Iyer, and he's runs a company called Moonshot, and they're doing basically AI, imaging, robotics, computer vision. He's doing like workforce education and training specific to just those things, working with high school students, startups, Fortune 500s. So like, I feel like you guys are across the pond, distant cousins. You're doing it for catheters, he's doing it for that stuff. But it's our education system, and this is speaking as an American here. I feel like there's a lot of ways that it's broken, but one of the things that I wish, especially in collegiate graduate level, is like they would just let people pick lanes sooner. And like, say you want to do med tech and you really like catheters, like you can take like a course or two on, thermo this or whatever, but like you have to just wait until you like to really start like learning and applying that. And like, I don't know, the ability to have, your handbook be credited college hours if somebody went through it and was able to take a test. And you know what I'm saying? Like, how much better would that be for a mechanical engineer that knew they wanted to do med tech, right? They maybe grew up in suburb of Minneapolis and they just know they want to do it, but they have to go through the undergrad slog and wait to like really get trained on that stuff. And they're, paying to get, you see what I'm saying? I would love we could move to a place where it was a little bit more democratized in terms of kind of the specialization.
Absolutely. And now there has to be an allowance for new cutting edge trends and knowledge to be put into the educational system rather than stick on what we know from 20 years ago. But what I realized about the education system from around where I've seen it is once you leave college or university, 20% of what you're learned, if you're lucky, might be applicable in what you're doing in industry. The other 80% is essentially dumbbells to keep your brain trained on learning without it learning in the right direction. If we could modularize the education system so everything you're learning is something that you can go around and turn around tomorrow and actually do something with.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's also like that neuroplasticity. I mean, learning is a lifelong endeavor, right? But like the science behind it shows that your neuroplasticity is like hits kind of a nadir at like 24 years or whatever it is around abouts that. So like that time period is critical. Doing it then is different than doing it with somebody that's, my age or older. You know what I'm saying?
There is ways around that. So I was obsessed with psychology and neurology. When I went to college, I studied product design, but I attended more psychology and neurology lectures than product design lectures. So I found the neuroplasticity, it does stiffen off at around 27, 28 when your hormones go out. And the reason for that is you're going through a lot more micro traumas up until that age. So if you really want to start learning, what I suggest to people is move everything around in your office, move everything around in your room. If the world feels different, you're more alert, more engaged. And then once you get sleep, those new pathways that were built while you were in a more of an alert state will set in with you later on.
Yeah.
So now I'm not saying go divorce your wife just so that you can start learning more in the morning. But I'm saying a little bit of trauma in small different ways, like your coffee cup isn't kept in the right place or your coat isn't hanging in the right place. Those micro little things will let you more. You can start absorbing more.
Dude, that's so cool. This is why you listen to this podcast, guys. You're getting neuroplasticity, improvement training that you never thought you would have gotten. No, I can't wait to be rearranging the hell out of my office and my wife comes in like, what are you doing? I'm training my microplasticity.
I'm doing micro traumas to myself.
I'm self-inflicting micro traumas, babe. Watch out.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it never stops. And even you just figuring out some sort of new way that people are doing it, if you can latch that or anchor that onto something that you existingly know, it's much easier to create that new synapses or that new link in your brain. So go into this like you already know this technology that you're going. Like I have definitely a very strange level of confidence going into this stuff that I've never seen before, because it's not a failure. It's just like I've learned how it doesn't work.
Yes, exactly.
That opens up the door to these options could still work.
Process of elimination, right? That's all it is, right? So if we're having this conversation 5 years from now, right, what would make you consider Eyedea MedTech Education a success or failure? What metrics beyond revenue are you using? Are you looking at, and kind of where are you seeing it going? Like what in 5 years do you want to look at it and say, this is what it looks like, and this is what I think is my vision, my success?
I take it I'm meant to be basing my company's success off revenues.
No, I said beyond revenue. Yeah.
No, revenue has never even been a thing. So it's essentially that one. Well, for me, it's that same existential feeling I felt when I was younger, where it was no one was on my side. There was something that was going to happen to me, and I just had to accept it and deal with it. So if someone else in that same position didn't feel that same overwhelming dread, that instead their head turned to an obsession of, okay, all the solutions, all the tools are out there. I can go take them and I can go make my device. So ideally, if no one ever needs me, that would be brilliant. If I could just lock myself in the countryside and just go making random pieces of furniture and different inventions and medical devices, like that is a version of success. So my company not being needed is a weird success. But essentially, if I could see a lot more movement in the R&D space, that if you can start going from blue sky thinking to a design freeze device within the space of a year. And like it's almost like when so I know with AI and everything else out, there's a lot of fear coming out, but there was a lot of fear when power tools came out, when a lot of carpenters said, I'm not going using those, they're going to put people out of business. but look at what we can do with power tools and make stuff. So when this is rapidly transforming so fast that I can't even get a grasp on what's going on, that'll make me smile.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I totally agree. I should have mentioned this earlier when you brought up AI again. I forget the company, but they had created essentially, I mean, it was partly driven by AI or machine learning or something, but it was like a real physics virtual environment where water droplets and basically, I mean, down to an elemental level. So think finite element analysis, but not on a component, on an environment. You know what I'm saying? And I honestly think and this may be 5-10 years out, but the ability to take a CAD drawing and then load in materials, right, and material specs, right, and even processing that's done to it to change, stiffness and yield strength and whatever, and then like push, saline through it at a certain temperature, and then really see, what's the flow rate here on this, and like literally taking a design all the way through V1, V2, V3, V4. Okay, now we feel like we want to prototype this, and it was all done in a virtual environment. I think that is out there in the future, and I would love to see companies in the R&D space lean into that. The second thing I wanted to say that spurred there was the tariffs that have just been announced, right? Whatever you think about it, that's not the point. The point is that there's probably going to be some economic turmoil. And, if there's market hits and these large companies, publicly traded companies and whatnot, right? If they're starting to feel sweat on the bottom line and all this stuff, like I just pray to God they do not start cutting R&D budgets, and they do not start killing M&A activity that's already kind of been low to begin with, because those two things, right? If you're cutting R&D budgets at the big companies and then you're killing mergers and acquisitions, and so these, young companies, right? And there's a whole capital cycle that affects. If you're not acquiring companies, the venture capital groups and the investors are not getting money back. And so it's a whole supply chain of venture there. But if I just pray that those two things don't happen, because R&D and M&A activity like have to remain high for innovation to continue to accelerate. They just have to. So I'm really hoping that we see a persistence, because what is it? Marketing and R&D, those are the first things to get cut, right? And I'm just like hoping that we don't hit this point. So, but building on that, right? Innovation bottlenecks. In your experience, what is one of the biggest choke points that you see in bringing truly innovative catheter designs and technologies to market? Is it regulatory hurdles? Is it manufacturing limitations? Is it the way they're thinking? Is it something clinical? Like, what are you seeing it is that maybe most outsiders might not appreciate?
I'd be naive to some parts of it, but I have found that how you gear up the question of the device that you're doing, so what the actual device need is and who the customers are. So that's one thing. You can have the most incredible engineers, the most credible innovators out there make an amazing solution, but they just don't know how to go past that stage. So I love the fact that we're having so much different minds getting mixed into this system, that they're able to take the engineers and say, okay, just aim in this direction and we'll be okay. But even to be able to, so one of the big problems I've found with R&D is, when it gets to a certain point, and then the whole idea of building a company up until it gets acquired, and then nothing gets happened with that technology or that process, that invention. A little bit earlier, because it's in the back of my head, is the first question you were saying about in 5 years' time about how
Yeah.
we'd have a simulation model. So in my head, people might be scared about if one person and one computer could create every single device, like, does that put us all out of work? And I was like, no, we are just mass producing devices at the moment because that's the system we have.
Yeah.
In my head, in the future, we are building to print custom medical devices that are used specifically for the person and how they need it. And having that knowledge and having that simulation space, we'll be able to create and develop that. I'm so lucky that I've gotten exposed to some technologies that are coming out in the future, that the way we think, if we know how to put all these catheters together in different ways, that's all going to be scrapped, and we're going to have a whole new technology that's actually building the braiding within devices and everything else 40, 50 years in the future, if we're lucky. So as technology is advancing so much, it's opened up so much more doors. So that simulation space will only allow us to use the new technologies easier. It's not going to hinder anything. It just means that all our innovations are going to get much more advanced, much safer, and geared in towards what the patient actually needs. Because if you're working in a silo for 4 years on a device, you've completely forgotten what that patient is actually, what they're experiencing, what they go through, how their life is before and after the procedure. You're just like, this is my list of inputs, this is my list of outputs, and you're focusing on that. So that is what I found a big hindrance to some of R&D is when you get too pigeonholed on the input output.
Yep.
Where you forget that there's a person alive, a million lives behind the other end of it.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, it's a good point.
Keep grounding ourselves to the humanistic aspect of it, because too many people working in medical device companies don't realize that they're working in medical device companies. Go on to AI. Ask about the device that you make. Ask how many people in your area take this device, and then do the numbers. Ask it over 10 years, what percentage of people would I not see walking down the street?
Yeah, if that wasn't nice. Yeah.
Created. And then you walk out the door, and you don't lose you don't gain that sterile approach to what your work is, and you bring back that joy and that optimism in what you're doing.
Yeah, that's awesome. So how do you see like the intersection of imaging technologies and kind of catheter-based technologies and interventions? Like how do you see catheter-based interventions and imaging technologies intersecting?
Oh, endlessly. If you picture a fluoroscopy, an x-ray, so get an x-ray in your head. Now, for anyone who is always wondering how x-rays work, do you remember that periodic table you've seen in school?
Mm-hmm.
The lower down that periodic table, the slower the beam goes through, and then it turns to a different color. So we pick materials. If they're low down the table, they shine up in your x-ray. But if you can imagine taking a 2D image and then a doctor going in and using this 2D image to try and think like, okay, maybe an inch and a half forward, little bit to the left, versus what did I see, like fiber optic imaging, so radiation free imaging. Imagine if you could put on a pair of glasses and look inside a body while you're putting in that medical device. Like 80-90% of medical procedures are getting the device to where it needs to go. Imagine if that was down to 5 minutes, you have the device in, you turn it on, where 66% of your technology is just at actually doing what it's designed to do. How much more people you'd save, how many people you'd turn around, how much less accidents would happen. If there's any device failures, you'd know it immediately. So it's like trying to work from someone's sketch to tell you how to get across the country and visit someone's house versus you now having Google Maps.
Yeah, I mean, it's fundamentally, it's using a 2D map to navigate a 3D environment, which is difficult to do, right? When you've got X, Y, and Z axis things to navigate through. No, I totally agree. A
2D picture, not even a video. It's not even live.
Yeah, that's true. So I know you've got an upcoming R&D Masterclass tour in the US. Tell us more about that.
Yes. So my R&D Masterclass, it's essentially created from, or the book was created from it. So I'll be going to June. I don't know the exact dates, the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th week. And during the middle week in University of Massachusetts, I'll be running 2 open workshops. So it's 2 days, get to feel all the materials, see how it's doing. It doesn't matter if you're an R&D engineer with 30 years experience or you've never seen a catheter before. The way that I tailor my workshops, you'll pick it up very fast. If you have more experience, you'll take a lot more out of it. But this is essentially you getting to experience how every other company across the world is building devices. Me giving away any secrets without giving away any knowledge. It's just, this is all the different tools, this is all the different ingredients you can put into a device, and you can just see people's eyes open up. You can even see people wanting to run into the lab and actually making something that they're like, I never knew it was as easy as that. So I have a couple of spaces left for any companies who want dedicated workshops, and they're more tailored for what your company is doing, if it's in the cardio space or neural space. But these are have been absolutely revolutionary for every company. I have a belief of, I love working myself out of a job.
Absolutely. Can I ask you a question? So like, say I'm at a, tier 1 or tier 2, whatever, big, small supplier vendor. And I'm like, man, I work with extrusion, I work with catheters. Like, I really want to take this thing. They can probably go request to their boss, to their whoever, that the company reimburse that, and they go attend it on behalf of the company, correct?
Absolutely. And the same thing, if I go working with any of the companies that are doing supply, they're like, the engineers never explained fully what they're doing. Most R&D engineers, their partner doesn't have a clue what they do. So when you get to talk to a supplier that's like, I see your problem. Have you tried this? Oh, you're using those process parameters?
Yep.
Okay, now we have the material for you. Try this, cut it this way. And then the engagement that they get back, because it's now a game of ping pong. It's table tennis. You're batting ideas back and forward.
That's awesome. Yeah. So we're getting close to time here. And before I kind of do the final wrap up, I wanted to just ask, I mean, we've talked a lot about the trends that you're seeing, the Masterclass tour, the R&D handbook, how you want it to change the industry, how it is changing kind of the industry and having the impact. So anything that you want to say about, Eyedea MedTech Education, the growth strategy that you've had thus far to get to where you are, but then kind of the growth strategy and vision for the next 5 years. How are you wanting to grow? What are the levers you're pulling, and what's that point you want to get to?
So you've all heard of St. Patrick's Day. Very way to start this. There's a mountain in Ireland called Patrick. It's kind of where it symbolizes where it is. So I'm after buying a pub at the foot of Patrick, which I will be converting into an advanced education space, building a lab inside, have an education space where I can finally do my augmented reality trainings. You can see the medical devices up in front of you. So my next step is pack down the house, move the lab into that, and spend the next year building that up. So it's you have an idea, you come out for 2 days, and you walk away with the actual in hand. So
that's so awesome.
Sinking the next bit of my time along with trying to get out of the house a little bit more, do the US tours and do similar, start doing tours all around the world, targeting different areas that want to innovate fast and want to start churning out the future of medtech devices.
Man, that's so awesome. I'm just like buzzing, picturing it in my head, like what that space is going to look like. Being able to come, fly out on a Monday, fly back on a Friday, and like have like so much of this like figured out, right? So much of a project figured out and a design. That's really awesome. So I know we're getting close to time here, Damian. I could have kept this going for I don't even know how long, but this was so awesome. But final part here, we'll just kind of give you the floor. Anything, that you want to kind of talk about, alert people of, plug anything. We'll put link to your LinkedIn, the website, the handbook, like all of that stuff. We'll put that in the show notes. But anything else that you want to kind of speak to or plug, floor is yours.
I think the one advice, and it's advice I'd give absolutely every engineer that I do talk to, is to go out and if you're even a little bit curious of a new technology, or even have every Thursday for the afternoon, book up half an hour with loads of different suppliers and just chat to them. Ask them what new technologies are out there. What are you doing interesting? Don't even have an agenda going into it. Like the people in these companies, they know their technology inside out. They know what they can tell you, and having these conversations is what unlocks new little blocks in the back of your head, new little keys that unlock the doors to new technologies going forward. So biggest advice is just start making friends. I couldn't tell you. Sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say it's so true. Like making friends and building your network and trying to learn from, ask them questions, try to learn from them. It's so important.
Yeah, and not even assume that you know what you're going in there with an agenda for. It's just be naive. Don't be afraid to be stupid. Like we're all human at the end of the day.
That's
AI
right.
can compensate for us where we need to, but do not be afraid to even look stupid or appear stupid.
Yeah.
One of those things is, I heard today, the glass ceiling that you reach today can be your floor tomorrow.
That's right. Oh, I love that. That's a great way to end on. So Damian Carr, Eyedea MedTech Education. Thank you for being on the pod. This was an absolute blast. I know I learned a ton out of it. In addition to the neuroplasticity stuff, I learned a ton. But we'll have to do this again. I also have some other ideas on how we can do like a little mini workshop in the Exo MedTech community. Would love to do that at some point, and some other things that we're going to have to take offline. But Damian, thank you once again. Thank you for everybody that tuned in and stayed around for the whole pod. And until I see you next time, thanks again for tuning in. Have a good day.
Thank you very much, Spencer. And can I just say though, I absolutely love your podcast, how you engage with people, your beautiful comfort without it. I completely forget that I'm actually chatting on a podcast. So
that's the idea.
What we're doing. Please stay doing it as long as you can,
dude. That means a lot, dude. Like honestly, no one's ever said that when we were finishing a pod before. So I really, really appreciate that. But a little bonus everybody got there at the end. Damian, such a gent, such a pleasure. And sign off again here, everybody. Take care. Thanks for listening. Thank you.